Yes. All right. Well, welcome to another edition of Park Chats. Again, the National Park Service turned 110 and one day this morning. We're also part of National Park Week, so celebrating with a whole week of America's public lands or America's best idea. And so today's presentation is going to fit into seeing the history dating back through much of that 110 years. And Mary Hill will be presenting. I'll talk about her in a little bit. The Park Chats, it's the fourth Wednesday of every month. It's here at the Garland County Library. So we couldn't host this without the library. Also with Eastern National, which is the bookstore that you can find on Bathhouse Row. And then with the Friends of Hot Springs National Park, who are able to be our sort of outreach partners. And so thank you to all the organizations. We also have some of our local regular volunteers. I won't highlight them, but they are in the audience today. So again, we can't do the work that we do without the community that's here. And GREG people did just figure out that I was pointing in your direction. This is our first year doing Park Chats. It's also part of America 250 and Freedom 250, which is sort of for us a year-long exploration and celebration of the United States. And here in Hot Springs, the first section was the deep history of Hot Springs. So we learned about archaeology and the founding of Hot Springs. And then this summer, we went over Hot Springs' influence on American history and the American story. And even though it's August and it still feels like summer, we're now transitioning into our third act of the fall, which is the work that is done these days in the park to preserve it for future generations. Because parks are for the people who founded it, present generations who visit, and future generations that we won't meet, but that we are passing on these public lands. And so a lot of the speakers that we'll have this fall are part of our resource division, people who do the active work of making the place that we all love amazing and learning the stories of it and then presenting those stories. So our first presenter in this fall subsection of Park Chats is Mary Hill, who arrived as our museum technician in 2011. I told her that I would start adding things to her biography just to see super exciting stuff. For instance, she did live in Utah on an Air Force base, near an Air Force base, which we can have all sorts of pretend stories, but the real story is that she's been part of preserving America's military history or its park history for decades. And so we're very fortunate for all the work that she does here in the park. She has a bachelor's degree in history and in biology, and she puts both of those to work in her interests that she pursues here in the park. And she has a master's degree in library science, which is appropriate for being in the library. And so without further ado, Mary Hill on sort of the historic photography of the National Park Service.
Good afternoon. I want to make sure that you can hear me. How's that? Can everyone hear me? Good. Okay, great. So thank you, Kane, for that introduction. Although I do have a master's in museum studies, so that enables me to work in a lot of museum collections. And if you have any questions during the talk, please feel free to raise your hand and let me know that you've got a question about something we're talking about. I'm pressing everything.
Yes.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about a special photographer that the Park Service calls an eminent photographer. Now, they use this term for people who have completed a large body of work for the Park Service. And they've gone out and they've captured through their images the very soul of all of the places that we are here protecting. Our national parks, our historic sites, our monuments, our battlefields, all of the natural and cultural resources that are in our country. And so far, there have been 13 photographers who have earned this honorary title of eminent photographer. Now, it's not an official title, but the archivist for the National Park Service came up with the listing. And so George Grant is one of them. And often, as in the case of George Alexander Grant, they go uncredited for their images. And the photos will be attributed to National Park Service or NPS photo when you see them. And these photographers worked in all kinds of weather. They lived in rough conditions just to get these images for us to travel to see these treasured places throughout our country. Now, this is a photo of Echo Canyon, and it's on the East Rim Trail at Zion National Park. And you can see, I know it's kind of bright, but here they are on pack horses going along the trail. Now, this was produced on a lantern glass slide, and you can tell because it's been colored. You can see some coloration here and down in here. This one was taken in 1929. So George Grant went everywhere, and he really had a great career with the Park Service. And when the Park Service was starting out, there wasn't a photographer on staff. And photography of the Great Western areas had mostly been taken by early artists like William Henry Jackson and Timothy O'Sullivan. So let's look at a couple of their images. The one on the left is the lower falls of the Yellowstone River. Now, William Henry Jackson was part of the expedition that originally had gone to Yellowstone. And his images, along with the paintings of Thomas Moran, were what enabled us to make the Yellowstone the national park that it is today. On the other side is an image taken by Timothy O'Sullivan at Canyon de Chelly. And this is a really beautiful image. And we'll see this one again. But O'Sullivan was an apprentice to Matthew Brady, who was the Civil War photographer. And a lot of times, Sullivan's images got attributed to Matthew Brady. So he did eventually leave his employment and strike out on his own. He did end up working for the U.S. Geological Survey and traveled around the world. So Grant didn't start out as a photographer. He was born on March 4th in 1891 in Sunbury, Pennsylvania. And he grew up being active outdoors. And he loved history and geography, although he really didn't like going to school all the time. But once he graduated, he did a variety of jobs. He was a machinist helper at a steel mill, and then he ended up being an art metal worker at the Roycroft Commune in East Aurora, New York. And this is some of his work that he did there. Now, after the sinking of the Lusitania, Grant joined the U.S. Army in 1917. You see there's his image there. He joined as a private, and he served with 61st Field Artillery that was stationed at Fort Russell near Cheyenne, Wyoming. Now, he might have joined the military because of Elbert Hubbard, who had been the founder of the Roycrofters. And Elbert Hubbard and his wife were both lost in the sinking of the Lusitania. Now, Hubbard had traveled here to Hot Springs, and he had written one of his books about it as the Little Journey book to the Maurice Bathhouse. So at the end of the war, Grant decided that he was going to do something else. He was honorably discharged as a second lieutenant, but it was during this time in Wyoming that he really developed his love for those wide open spaces and the natural beauty of the West. Now, he returned home to Sunbury to live with his family, but the inside of an office or a factory no longer appealed to him. So in 1921, he started writing to the newly formed National Park Service, which was formed in 1916. I already had that in there. And he was also writing to Horace Albright, who was the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park at the time. He was trying to find a job as a ranger. So he was persistent in his letter writing, and it paid off when he got a seasonal job as a ranger in 1922. And Grant was really excited, and he gladly accepted the $80 a month pay, and of course he got room and board as well. It was much less than what he had been making when he was in Pennsylvania, but it was exactly what he wanted. And so this is a photo of the seasonals, And this is Grant right here. See there? He's really happy. Wow, he was really happy. And his job was to keep visitation and travel statistics for the park. But it was at Yellowstone that he came across some unused camera equipment, and he started taking photographs of people and places in the park. Now, this is kind of a famous photo. So he did a good job taking photos throughout the park, but this one really got him into a bit of hot water.
Yeah.
Horace Albright, as I said, was superintendent of Yellowstone National Park. And he and Grant were touring the park when they stopped at Lake Lodge, and the manager came out and said, I'm going to be feeding the bears some pancakes, and finally talked Albright into sitting down with the bears. You didn't really want to, but he said, as long as you're feeding them, it's okay.
Yeah.
Well, so unfortunately, the photos ended up in newspapers all across the country, and Albright got a telegram from his boss, Stephen Mather, who was director of the National Park Service, who said, get rid of those negatives, and that no superintendent in the Park Service should be seen feeding the bears. That was kind of a tricky situation. But Grant still kept his job, and he transitioned into a permanent ranger later that year to do backcountry patrol and photography at the same time. But winter was coming on, and he was concerned that there would be very little patrolling to do, and that the photography wouldn't take up all of his time. And so he asked them to let him go. He said he didn't want to waste their money, and he didn't want to feel like a pensioner. So, although Albright was sorry to see him leave, he encouraged Grant to continue with his photography and said keep in touch with him. Now, Grant spent the next 7 years working on his photography and trying to convince the National Park Service to hire him as a photographer. Now, he continued to hone his craft, and he ended up working at Penn State College, which later is Penn State University, in their photography department. But finally, in 1929, after 7 years of waiting, his dream came true. Horace Albright had been appointed the director of the Park Service, and he selected Grant to be the first NPS photographer. So he was really excited. So the first thing he did was he set up a lab in Berkeley, California, and then went out all across the country. He was so excited. He drove either a car or a panel van that he adapted to be his darkroom that he called the hearse. We'll see some pictures of it in just a minute. But in his first summer on the road, he drove over 4,000 miles. So he was very busy. And you see this is the lower picture is the one of him in his lab. So here is his map where he tracked all of his travels. And you can see he went all over the country. And it's estimated that he traveled over 140,000 miles. So he went all over the country taking his photographs.
What do you have against Michigan?
So here it is in the back of his hot, stuffy panel van. There's the hearse there. This is a film that he took when he was at Capitol Reef. And this road actually still exists. It's there in Utah. But once he took all the photos, he would take all of them back to his lab and then print them up. So here's an early photo that Grant took of the square tower house there at Mesa Verde. And you can see that he's not on a trail or anything like that. But look, right here, he's standing right here on this ledge. So this was an early time in a lot of these parks that there weren't trails or roads or anything like that. So he was out there standing on ledges, taking all of these photos. There's another one that they took. And this is at the Hanging Gardens at the Narrows Trail at Zion National Park. And if you look right here, these are actually, they're standing on this built up wall to make this ledge. That's pretty treacherous. And if you look up ahead of them, it looks like there's been a rock slide. But there's a tour guide there with them who has brought them out there to see that. So people were coming out and seeing these parks early on. Let's look at another one. Okay, so sometimes Grant ended up in some of the photos. This is a 1930 photo that was taken by Ansel Hall, who was the chief naturalist of the Park Service. And it shows Grant photographing the scout naturalists in their truck before they go out for their first season into the national park system. And this photo was taken at the Western Museum Lab there at the University of California in Berkeley. Now this is the end of the summer. So there they are saying goodbye to the scout naturalists. And this is at Grand Canyon. And that's Ansel Hall that's standing right here. And this is Grant. And I don't know if you'll notice in some of the photos, or almost all of them I've seen of him, he's either got his hands in his pockets or he's got his hands on his hips. That's just how he always stands. And I think Harvey Stork was the photographer for that one. So this is another daring image that was taken on the trail to the north side of Ptarmigan Tunnel at Glacier. And this is visitors on horseback. And they're right here at this little tiny ledge going along there. So he was out there photographing people doing these things to encourage everyone to go out and do this too. Everyone come out to the parks. Now this is Grant when he's getting ready to go out into the field with all of his photography equipment. This is at Yellowstone National Park. And he's at his happiest. This is what he loved to do. He loved to go out into the backcountry. Sometimes he took tour guides with him who knew the areas better than he did. And he's got all of his equipment with him. Here's his tripod strapped onto his saddle there. Here's one of his cameras back here. So this is where he is really happy. Although he did have kind of a love-hate relationship with horses. He got bucked off with one time. Now this photo was taken by Ezekiel Johnson Grant, and they're at a rock formation at Natural Bridges that's called the Goblet of Venus. This was taken in 1934. And you can see he's standing there, and then he turns around and he takes Zeke's picture as well in the same place. Now Zeke was the custodian there, but he was also the tour guide, and he was a good storyteller. Now, unfortunately, although this was a large landmark for people, and they always came and took their photographs there, in 1948, some vandals came out, put a chain around it, and pulled it down. So if you look at the images of it today, of this location, it's broken off down right here. And then some of these pieces you can see are laying on the ground. But it is a real shame that it's not there anymore. It was so unusual. Okay, so also as part of his job, he would travel with other expeditions. This is the Sonora Missions Expedition, and they were a survey team that was gathering architectural information on the Spanish colonial missions, and they were trying to get this information so they could help rebuild the ones that were in southern Arizona. Now, at the time, Mexico was having some political upheaval, and on more than one occasion, they did end up being guarded by federal troops. And you can see in the picture, we've got Rose here. He was the naturalist, and then DeLong and Miller were the architects. Woodward was the archaeologist, and then Tovar was the engineer. So he had this wide group with him, but I don't know if you can see in this photo. So here's Grant sitting here, and he's got his camera around his neck. He took a lot of photos of them. So they're surveying all of the damage, and most of the missions had been heavily looted by this time, and that's Tomaria there in the photograph. But it also serves as a baseline. What did these look like at this day? So in 1931, Grant was notified that he got promoted to chief photographer. So he was really excited about it. Although the promotion meant that he had to move his office and his labs from Berkeley all the way to Washington, D.C. So in the 1930s and 40s, Grant would split his time between the western U.S. and Washington. And he would take his photos out west, and then he would come back for the winter time and then develop all of his prints. And it gave him a chance to also document a lot of the Eastern parks and start taking portraits of people, especially people that worked in the National Park Service. Now, this is a really great image of George Grant, and I'm going to point out he's meeting William Henry Jackson right here. This is the photographer. And remember I showed you his earlier image of the Yellowstone, the lower falls? Well, this is him at that time. Kylie here is another photographer, and then here's George, his hands in his pockets. And then he's also with Edmund Rogers here, who was the superintendent of, Rocky Mountain. He was superintendent of Rocky Mountain at the time. And they're at the old Washington Airport. This is actually the location of the Pentagon now. It's not there any longer. So, of course, when the photographers get together, they take pictures of each other. So this is Grant's photo that he took of William Henry Jackson. And they're actually in his lab and everything where he developed his images. But Jackson was such a tremendous artist with his photography. It was just amazing the work that he did. So Grant also traveled in other places as well. This is a place that is called Badwater, and it's the lowest point in the United States, and it's 279.8 feet below sea level. So that is really hot there. And it was photographer John Bryan took this photo of Grant there. So they were visiting there, and of course, you see Grant standing there with his hands on his hips. This is an image that they took at Capitol Reef, and this is, you can see in the foreground, there's the hearse. But he also has some people with him as well. Like I said, he would often employ some local tour guides that would help him out. And so you can see. Now, he called this his traveling darkroom. And the conditions were pretty rough for them most of the time. This is a cave at Monument Valley where they've stopped to take some lunch. And yeah, it's a beautiful setting, but it was pretty rough when they're out there all the time. And Grant also went down to southern Texas to take photos of a place that was called Texas Canyon State Park. But it would later become Big Bend National Park. And you can see, here's Vila and Irby. They were both his tour guides. And then he's also with Everett Townsend, who is often called the father of Big Bend National Park. He was a local rancher who worked tirelessly to have that area named a national park. Now we're going to look at some photos that Grant took of White Sands National Monument in 1936 when he was out here. Now, he wasn't always in favor of taking landscape photos with people in them because he said that eventually their clothes would be outdated and you wouldn't be able to use the image. So here's another one that he took without people. So he said this would be usable forever. You wouldn't be able to tell.
Would you tell us what states these are in? Because I'm not familiar with all these parks.
Okay.
I mean, just as you're going through.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. White Sands National Monument is in New Mexico.
New Mexico. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry.
Did you know that?
Okay. So here's another one. And there's one thing about these images is that they're all amazing. You look at this today, you could take this photograph. And I think that was one of the things with Grant out there. He was trying to take images that you would recognize. And even after, more than 90 years, this is still a great photo.
Mhm.
So here's Grant in 1936, and they're at the Grand Canyon Airport. They're about to take an airplane expedition. So they've got their pilot and everything, and let's see, let me get here. Here's the superintendent of Mesa Verde. This is Thomas Bent. He is the chief landscape architect of the Park Service, along with Merle Sager. And then here's Grant. Now, he had been taking some photos from airplanes, and one of his first aerial flights that he took over Arches National Park was possibly the first one that ever was taken over a national park. So he was kind of out there doing all the firsts. Let's see if I can get this. And the western parks weren't the only areas that Grant photographed. So in 1937, I'm sorry. Oh, okay.
Where it was, and I said Florida off.
Yes, yeah, this is in Florida. So he was out there photographing down at Fort Jefferson at the Dry Tortugas National Park. And I don't know if you know where it is. It is well off the coast of Key West. So you have to actually take a boat or a plane out there. It's really a great place to go, though. Well worth the trip. So here's an image of Fort Matanzas National Monument. This area is along the Matanzas River. It's not actually on the coastline, but as you come up Florida, you'd be able to go over onto a bridge to get over to it. It became a national monument in 1924. And Matanzas is the Spanish word for slaughters. This area has quite a history with conflict here. Now, Grant not only photographed existing parks, but he was frequently asked to go and survey proposed areas that could possibly become national park units. This is his image of Cape Sebastian along the Oregon coast, and he took these images when he was there in 1938. The area does not become a national park, but it is still a state scenic corridor. It's really beautiful to see the sea stacks along there. And this is in Oregon. Now, several people have described Grant as kind of a shy or retiring person who never wanted the limelight and that it was difficult for him to take portraits of people. And some people have criticized him for only taking images of young women frolicking in nature. I always thought that was a funny description. But after looking through hundreds of his photos, I think he took more meaningful images. So let's look at a few. Now, this is one of my favorite images. This is Emmett Harrison, and he's a Navajo. He's at the balcony house at Mesa Verde National Park. And it's just a beautiful picture of this young man. You can see the look in his eye, and it seems like Grant really took his time to do this portrait. It's just amazing. So he also took, this is a picture of Aunt Sophie and Uncle Tom Campbell at their log house in Gatlinburg, Tennessee. This is in November of 1931. And he was there to complete a documentary survey for the Park Service of the people and the landscapes that were there. Eventually, in 1934, Great Smoky Mountains becomes a national park. Now, Olympic had been changed from a national monument to a national park in 1938, and Grant had made multiple trips up to this park. In this image that he took in 1940, he's got the photograph of the lighthouse on Destruction Island and the lighthouse keeper there, Albert Bear, and you can see him, there he is right there in the photograph. And this is him with his daughter Irene, and he's with Elmer Winbeck, who is also the Coast Guard boat captain. And if you can look right between them, here's their pet fawn. He's kind of giving him a kiss on the face there. So this is a great portrait. I don't know why people said it couldn't take. They're just really great. I love this. So this is photographs of the conservation. This is the Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC. This is the camp number 3 that's down at Grand Teton National Park. It was north of Jackson Lake. The other one is at Glacier National Park, the one at the very top. Now the CCC was made up of impoverished or unemployed young men during the Great Depression. And they came into the parks and they built roads, they built structures, they built trails, all kinds of things. They produced fire protection for our parks and any of the other jobs that needed to be done. So they did a good job. And they also came here to Hot Springs National Park. So they were here working during this time. This is an image of the Rangers at Aztec Ruins National Monument. They're standing in front of a reconstructed Native American kiva there. The ladies in the picture are the tour guides. And right here this is the custodian of the park, and his name is Carol Miller. I don't know who the other 2 men are, but Grant would go into the places and he would take photos of the staff that worked there. He tried to document everything.
What states?
It's Arizona. Okay. This has got to be my all-time favorite image. I love this one. He's taken a photograph of a ranger. I don't know if you can see it. Here he is right here. Standing in the Grant Muir Woods. This is so beautiful. You can actually feel the peace of them standing there in this beautiful place. And this is what made people want to go out there to see them. They saw these images and they said, I want to go see that. And so they got in their cars and they left. So, which was good. Now, this is a stalagmite that's called the Giant Dome, and it is the largest of stalactites ever found. It's 16 feet in diameter, and it's estimated to be over 60 million years old. And it's located in the Hall of Giants at Carlsbad National Park, Carlsbad Caverns. And this is really an amazing photo because if you've ever tried to take a photograph in there where it's really dark, it is very difficult. So he did the lighting just great in this one.
New Mexico.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm your teleprompter.
Okay, yeah, keep up with those states for me. So many of Grant's photos were taken to document changes that were occurring in parks to provide a record of something that was occurring. Now, this building is called Old Bedlam, and it shows that the north side had been reconstructed, and so he was there taking the photographs. That was called Old Bedlam because of the noises that would come out of it. This was actually the bachelor officers' quarters there at Fort Laramie in Wyoming. So I guess it was quite noisy and they had a good time. This is a view from the southwest of the roof of the superintendent's office from their main building of Casa Grande. And Grant had returned in 1947 and took a second image of it, and it is in color. He did do some color photos. But he did this for comparison, and I know you're kind of far away, but if you're looking at, here's the sidewalk here originally, and then here it is here. So you can see that there's a difference in layout. Some of the vegetation has changed. There's actually building back over here. So this is a way for this park to be able to keep up with the changes that have been made for it. Now here are a couple more of the color photos that he took, but they were probably a directed photo shoot. They used his images in brochures and on posters and newsletters, anything that the Park Service was publishing. But he did continue to use black and white film to the end of his career. Now, in 1948, he moved his operations back out to Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado. And this allowed him to document all of this work for the Missouri River that was going to be flooded because of the new installations of dams along the river. And so there are archaeological sites all along there that the archaeologists at this time were trying to get in there and get all the information that they could before they would all be inundated. And Grant took over 5,000 negatives of this whole process. And now these structures and these sites are lost underneath the rising water of the Missouri. So remember the image I showed you of the White House at Canyon de Chelly by Timothy O'Sullivan. This is Grant's on the left here. And it's just as beautiful as the other. They're kind of taken in the same location, but obviously it's a different time of day. And Grant was really an amazing photographer. I know I keep saying that, but he received a lot of criticism. People would compare him to Ansel Adams and say his photos were not as artistic and were just not as great. But that's really unfair to Grant because Ansel Adams worked for himself. He was a photographer, he was an artist. And George Grant was working within the confines of the National Park Service. They were telling him what to take, how they needed things. You know, they wanted these images in specific ways. But still, Grant was able to produce beautiful artistic images, even with all of those regulations. So I think it's kind of an unfair criticism against him. So you're wondering why I'm talking about George Grant at Hot Springs National Park. Well, he came here, so that's really exciting. On his way back east from a photography trip that he took to Boulder Dam, which is now called Hoover Dam, in 1937, Grant came to Hot Springs and started taking photos. Unfortunately, it was November. It was cold, it was overcast, it was snowing. So he only was able to take images outside of the buildings. But we've got a few of them. So one of the things that I want you to look at when you see all of these images that we're going to look at of the park is how things have changed. And we look at this one of the quapaw, and you'll notice that there's a poplar tree there. Those aren't there any longer. Originally, there were 3 layers of trees in front of the bathhouses on Bathhouse Row. There were the magnolias, which here they are here. There were the row of poplar trees, and then there was another row further back of the American hollies. Now, at this time in park, almost all of the American hollies and all of the poplar trees are gone, but we'll see them in these images as we go through here. So here's the Maurice Bathhouse, and you can see there's the poplar trees here. But also look right here. There's shrubbery underneath all of the magnolias along the very front walk. None of that exists any longer. And the lip to this flower bed is much higher than what it shows in this image now. So here's a picture of the Superior. You can see those trees out front. You see the shrubbery that I'm talking about. This enables us, especially in natural resources, to know what was planted in the park at different times. So it's such a great project that he did this. Now, this is an image of the administration building. And, well, it's where the administration building is. The really great thing about this is that we can see what was out front. You can see, let me point out here. Here is the Noble Fountain. And the administration building was built in 1935. But this fountain was not there. It was actually further up the street in front of the old administration building, which was also called the Pump House. But once they put in the new building, they moved it down here. But then they were really concerned because of all of this traffic. They were afraid something would jump the sidewalk and run into the fountain. So eventually it will be moved once again from here to the southern terminus of the Grand Promenade where it is today. And if you look right here, here is the jug fountain. And this man is using it. It will eventually be moved well back over here at the edge of the grassy area in front of the first building here. And then, of course, you can see here's the Gates block. It's still there. And at that time, it was a Steak and Shake.
That's what?
A Steak and Shake?
It's Hill Wheatley now.
Yeah,
Oh, gotcha.
yeah, the Gates block.
So it's reserved in Central.
So, and this is when he came back, when Grant was able to come back in July of 1953 to take more photographs. This one is inside the administration building. Now, if you go in there today, you can still see this area, but it looks a lot different. And it'll be, all of these areas are closed up. And this wall that you can see back behind here has been taken out. And this is now the conference room for the administration building. But this ceiling with the chandelier, all of this woodwork, and this flooring is still there. This is the government bathhouse as it looked in 1953. Now, it's later renamed the Donald S. Libby Physical Medical Center. But early on, this is the south-facing place of the building, and they will put a portico here and build it out through this way and change all of this area. So now if you go down there, you can see that you come in from this street and can drive up under here and then out through the other side. Of course, it's currently under construction. You can go down there now. Here's an image from the inside in one of the bathing halls. And over here on the sides, you can see are the large tile tubs. So the big pools that multiple people could be bathing in. They're on both sides of the room. You can see here the other ones. And here are the individual tubs for people taking individual baths. He also took some images of the outside. So he went up on the tower and also across from Bathhouse Road. This one was actually taken from the Medical Arts Building. And you can see here's the bathhouses along here. You look over here, here's the former Army and Navy General Hospital located here. And right across the street, there's the Eastman Hotel. Of course, that's where the federal building is located today. And of course, here's Bathhouse Road. This is in front of the Lamar. And a few things have changed. So I was talking about those American hollies. Here they all are, down in a row. All of these have been removed. And a few things have changed on the outside of the Lamar. There's handrails that go up this ramp now. And the hedges have changed a little bit. And you'll notice that this border is raised now if you go down there. This is quite short. And here's a great picture of the Arlington Hotel with Arlington Lawn out in front of it. That hasn't changed too much. Once it became the lawn area, that has stayed pretty much the same. And of course, it's impossible to take a bad image of the Ozark. That's such a beautiful building. You can see there, although some of the vegetation out front of it has changed. And here's the the Fordyce, I'm sorry, I'm talking about the Marines. Here's the Fordyce. And in this part, if you look at this is a road here. And it enabled them to drive back around behind all of the bathhouses. Can't do that any longer. So this was the formal entrance here of the park. But they eventually changed this road, and then they put in planters along here that are planted with azaleas. Now this area here is called the Excedra, There were Excedra fountains located here at one time. They were removed, and then eventually this becomes a grassy area, and then that was taken out, and it now has the fountains that are there today that enable our visitors to be able to touch and see the fountain of water. And of course, here's the Grand Promenade. What a great place. It's such a wonderful place. If you go on a summer day, it's cooler, it's treed, it's beautiful. And ever since it was built up there, it's been very popular with people going up to play checkers, sitting on the benches, just enjoying nature. So it's a really great place. Now, in 1954, the National Park Service was suffering from budget cuts, and they decided to end Grant's job. And he wasn't really surprised because he had not been well. He'd had an upper respiratory ailment for some time. But on his retirement, he was awarded the Meritorious Service Award, and that's the highest commendation that is available to Park Service employees. So he really thought a lot of his work. Now, he had traveled more than 140,000 miles, and he made between 30 and 40,000 images. Okay, 30 to 40,000 images, and they were stored all over the country. Many of his negatives were never printed and just stored away. And his main concern when he retired was that most of his work would go unused and unknown. And in 1963, and long after he had retired, he was interviewed and asked if he still took photographs. And he said, "I don't take any at all anymore." He had turned in all of his camera equipment, and he really couldn't afford to have that as a hobby. But while he was visiting up at Rocky Mountain National Park with his friend, David Canfield, who was the former superintendent at Rocky Mountain, Grant became ill, and he decided that he wanted to go home. He rallied enough for them to get to Denver, to put him on a train to get back to Maryland, where his brother lived. But once he got there, he grew worse, and he checked into the Veterans Administration Hospital in Baltimore and passed away on October 11th. Now, I discovered George Grant about 10 years ago when I was working in the park's archive collection. And the more I learned about him, the more I was inspired by his photos, because I take photos too. Everybody goes to parks, they take photos. So when I was putting this program together, I saw this image. And this is Fort Jefferson at Dry Tortugas down in Florida. And that's Grant's image on the left. And then I thought, wait a minute, I took a photo there too. And that's my photo from 2015.
Wow.
And I thought, wow. And I hadn't seen his image before I had taken mine, so I was really thrilled. And I really wanted to say thank you to George Grant. He's keeping us all inspired to get out there to our national parks and take photos. So, any questions? Okay, get a question?
How did the Park Service get these photos to the public so the public could see them? I mean, publications, newspapers, or?
Exactly, they use them for everything, any kind of advertisement, or if you go to a park, you'll see that they had posters on the walls showing different things that were within their park, or they would print up park brochures, so they have all of these images. And it's really funny because his images for a long time just stopped being used, or so many people didn't realize that just the little credit thing that said NPS photo was actually a Grant photo. But there have been several people who have been trying to bring his images back out to the public. And I've got a couple of books here. One is by the Davises, and they wrote Landscapes for the People. They actually discovered his photos when they were working on another project, and they were at one of the National Archives. And for the Park Service. And they said, they saw some photos and they're like, whose photos are those? And they said, oh, that's George Grant's stuff. And so they went back later on and started really delving into his photos. So their book contains some really great images of his photos. And then there's another book that was written several years earlier by Mark Sawyer. And it actually has a foreword by Horace Albright in it talking about George Grant. But most of those photos from there they're mostly from the Southwest. So both are great books to look at though. Yes, ma'am.
So has all of his work been digitized now, or is some of it
No.
still inaccessible? Is there any project to do that?
Not currently. A lot of parks have their own images that he took. Like Hot Springs, we have the images that he took here at our park. I think there's a large repository of images that he took out around Scotts Bluff out in Nebraska. And the Nebraska Historical Society had a huge amount of Grant images. I'm trying to think if I don't think they still have them. I think they were transferred out to the Southwest because it was images covering some of that work he had done photographing the Southwest. But they are everywhere, all over the country. But they're beautiful images. So if you ever get a chance to take a look at some of them, please do. Yes, sir.
I can kind of see why he got into the Park Service. It's the same reason that after he retired, he quit doing it. It's because he couldn't afford it. And doing photography back then was very expensive. And so he could do what he wanted and be able to afford to do it by working for them.
Yes, he really, and like I said, he kind of got in it by accident, just finding the cameras there at the park and saying, hey, here's some camera equipment. I can go out and start taking photos. Now, I was looking at a site at Yellowstone. They are trying to digitize some of their collections as well. And they have a couple of just regular photo albums, and they all have really small images. They were taken by George Grant. So he was taking pictures of people there and recording different events at the park early on before he became, the Park Service photographer. So a lot of places are trying to digitize it. You got a question?
You mentioned that Grant was kind of restricted because he was for the National Park Service, but then kind of compared that to O'Sullivan, and then the person who did the Yellowstone, the lower Yellowstone River, where were they working? Was that just personal photography or?
Okay, Timothy O'Sullivan, I said he worked for Matthew Brady as an apprentice for a while when they were doing the Civil War images, but eventually he did go out on his own, and he would do commissions for other people, other companies or businesses that were looking for images, and then he eventually did work for the U.S. Geological Survey, doing a lot of their images. Now, William Henry Jackson, he was a photographer on the Hayden expedition, so he had been hired to work and take photographs when they went out there. And they were originally surveying the area that will become Yellowstone National Park. So he did work for different people over his career as well. So, and Ansel Adams has usually been the one that most people compare George Grant's work with. And it's really kind of apples and oranges to me, because Ansel Adams is going out there and he's taking an artistic photo. One, obviously has a great impact, but Grant's out there and he's recording a place. It's for posterity. I need to have an image that's going to last forever. And that's why he was talking about not having people in the photographs, because their clothing would date his images. And he wanted to be able to use them forever. So, any more questions? Yes,
I
sir.
was going to say, does the Park Service still have resident photographers that live in the national park for like a year at a time?
No, they don't. They do have some photographers that work for the Park Service that will go through and do surveys or record events. Most of the time, individual parks take their own photos. Like Kane takes photos, Tom takes photos, all of us take photographs. And then eventually all of those will go into our archive and will be a record for the future of what our park was like when we were here. So that's what we're all trying to do, is make sure that we have that continuity all along in our parks so that we know what has happened in the past and so we can make the right decisions for our parks in the future.
When he was here in Hot Springs, what, in November 37, do you know where he was housed?
I
Like
don't,
that, personal?
he didn't stay very long. He was only here for a day or two. And I guess the weather was so bad that he went ahead and went back home. But when he came back in July of 53, it was so much better for him. And he took quite a few photos that was here. And it was kind of funny because when I found them in our collection, but I wanted a listing of them because there was another photographer that was here by the name of Frank Werner that took a lot of photos as well. And sometimes they're very similar to Grant's photos. And I contacted the Park Service and the photography archives to see if they had a listing of them. And it's really funny. I got this 4-page thing sent to me, and it's all scribbled. And it's really hard to read. And I don't think it's either Grant or Werner's writing. So, but it'll say something weird like, I'm trying to think, like building. And then it'll say another building. And then I'm like, okay. So obviously somebody looking at these photos didn't really care to say, oh, this is the Quapaw bathhouse or this is the race bathhouse. They just said building. And so it was kind of interesting when I got there. I kind of laughed. But he has some just fantastic images everywhere. And I do recommend the landscapes for the people because let me show you some of the images. They're really beautiful. And they've gone through and tried to take some of, the best images that he took. And, here's the one of William Henry Jackson. So he took quite a bit of portraits as well. So I don't know why anybody would say that he didn't take them. But here's some Native American people. Here's a man that's fly fishing. I don't know if you guys can see these or not. But feel free to come up and look at this book if you'd like to.
Is that book here at the library also? Or what?
I'm sure it is.
I'll double check.
I'm sure it is. Yeah. So, but it's a really good book, and I don't know them or anything, so I'm not trying to push their book. But it really is a nice book with a lot of images. It's probably the biggest collection of his images that have been published right now. So, and then also we've got this one here by Mark Sawyer, and his is a little bit different, a little bit smaller images, and he talks about some of the places and all, but it's a lot in the Southwest. So and I can recommend both. Any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. 2 things. One is my own comment, not question, and then we'll have our not from the Park Service raffle. But I've used these photos, and I've given tours for over a decade. And to think that, you see the people in those photos and they're inspired and they're on horses, and other people are like, why are they on horses on the side of that mountain? And then if somebody were to take photos of us going to national parks today, we would be the people on the side of the mountain who in 90 years, somebody's going to say, why were they on the side of that mountain? And you just see how that's generations that we won't meet being inspired by their public lands, being recorded by George Grant. And then I then tell about how today we are still inspired by these same places, and we're still the same people wondering what's going on. So thank you for telling me
Sure.
about him. And again, we'll be here again next month with, why did I just blank on Liz's name? I didn't blank on Liz's name. Liz from the Garland County Historical Society. Tom sometimes gives it a different nickname, and I didn't say it, but it's also very nice. But we'll be here next month as well with Liz from the Garland County Historical Society. And I think that Paul has a final thing to say about
Yes.
something
Yes.
for those
Yes.
who came to watch Mary's presentation. Thank you again. One more round of applause for Mary on that wonderful presentation.
Okay, before we do the drawing, we're gonna turn off the live stream. But before we do that, to those that have watched online, this is one of the perks of coming to attend in person, is you'll be able to enter the prize drawing. But speaking of the live stream, we do record all of these, so if there's ever one that you missed or you want to share with someone else, you can find those on the library's YouTube channel and Facebook. If you've missed any of the past ones, they're all archived there to share. But yeah, try and come in person. You can have a chance to win one of these door prizes. So like Kane mentioned, these are not affiliated with Hot Springs National Park, and even on our end for the library, they are donated. Our door prize funding is from the Friends of Garland County Library. So these aren't coming from taxpayer dollars from the library either.
Did anybody miss out on getting a ticket that wants to enter? Raise your hand if we missed you on the tickets.
And while you're getting your ticket, don't forget our super unofficial place where you can put your email with no other attending personal information included on the very fancy list over there, which was torn out of my book. And that'll just, it'll be a reminder.
Row Emporium, the gift shop that's in the Lamar Bathhouse, which shares the space with where Mary works. So we've got a growler here, so you can fill with your spring water. And we also have the passport guide to the national parks, which anyone who visits national parks is incomplete without. So whoever wins first will get their first choice, and whoever I draw second will get stuck with whatever's left. Okay, the first ticket I drew is one of the white ones, ending in 889. All right, congratulations.
No, I'll take the book.
Okay, enjoy.
This is the large scale passport book, and now you have to take it on your vacation, which means you will inevitably forget it on your vacation. So you will have a lot of scrap paper with tape on it.
And then you can come back and win another.
You can go get your first stamp today at your backyard national park.
I want down there all the time.
Okay, and our other winner. Would you like the honors? Oh, one of the red ones, ending in 903.
Oh.
Heard it. Oh.
Did you?
All right. And you can go fill this up today.
Oh, wow. There's great one.
All right. So thank you. And maybe for a future door prize, we can get a copy of this book for next month. Or no promises, but we'll see if you. All right. And one more time for Kane and Mary with the second.
If you have questions, she'll be here until she